Let's talk about Illiterati, a cooperative word game about using letters before they get burned. Welcome to Brains on Games. I'm Dr. Brian McDonald. In this episode, we're going to talk about a cooperative spelling game, a word game, from the folks at Gap Closer Games. This is a game called Illiterati. Look at this gorgeous box. Hopefully you won't hear things rattling around in there, but Illiterati is a game for between 1 and 5 players. It's cooperative, like I said. Kids age 7 and up can figure this one out. There are rules to simplify things for the younger kids, and games take anywhere from half an hour to 40 minutes to play. Let's take a deeper look at Illiterati by Gap Closer Games. Illiterati is a light word building game, and it can be made lighter, or you can make it more difficult if you want to. There are lots of ways to play this one. The base game, the typical rules that you're going to play under are cooperative, so everyone is working together to use up those letters and form words. There are competitive modes that you can play as well. There's some little special rules where you have to talk with an accent, or you can't use your hands while you're playing the game. So it can be made easier or more difficult, and it can be made more serious or more silly. But typically you're playing this thing as a cooperative word game. What you're trying to do in this game is bind 3 books. You've got to get a red one and a blue one, and then there's a final chapter. You get to choose the color for the final chapter, whether you're going to do a red card or a blue card. And these books just tell you what you need to do in order to bind them, and that's all going to be involving using these little wooden tiles to spell words that correspond to a certain category. So you win the game by binding those 3 books, but you're going to lose the game if you wind up having too many letters left over. So at a normal level of difficulty, you can have 3 letters left over. That's going to be this little library. You start the game with 3 letters in the middle of the table that are drawn randomly from a bag. At the end of the round, if there are additional letters left over, you take one at random and it goes in here. Once you get to your 4th one, you've lost the game. So you really only have 4 times when you can have any leftover letters at the end of a round of this game. And the rounds they're simultaneous and they're timed. This is a real-time game. You've got a 3-minute sand timer here. So you're going to be playing this thing over multiple rounds, a minimum of 3 rounds, but probably more than that. And each round is going to be 3 minutes long based on this timer. I'm showing you, of course, the deluxe version of this game. I was able to pick this up on sale. I can't remember if it was a Black Friday sale or if it was Prime Day or something like that, but I ordered this directly from Gap Closer Games. The difference between the deluxe and the standard version, well, there are a few things. First of all, in the deluxe version, you have a dual layer burn tracker here where you're putting those letter tiles. The other thing is that the letter tiles in the deluxe version are wooden chips, as opposed to chipboard pieces that are a little bit thinner in the standard version. And the deluxe version also has bags that have the name of the game embroidered on them. So you're going to have 1 bag full of letters. The second bag is just for the discards. So the color doesn't matter, except that all of the letters start in 1 bag at the beginning of the game, and the discards are going to go in the other one. When you run out of letters here, then you're going to just switch bags so that you can continue the game. You start the game with 3 letters in the middle of the table. Each player is going to be dealt another 5 letters, and this is a pretty good draw, actually. Your letters are shared, and I could spell a word and then give that word to another player. You're only allowed to keep 8 words. Each player can only keep 8 words from one round to the next, but that's a very important ability because you want to save these extra letters in order to have some flexibility in terms of the books that you're trying to bind. So I've got these random letters here. None of them have swords on them, unfortunately. I do have 1 wild card. So there are some of these black tiles in the bag. Most of them have a letter on them, but their category here is wild. So when I'm looking for those 3 sword symbols, this counts as one of those. This one can be any letter at all that I want. Once that timer starts, you've got these 3 letters that are shared among everyone. You've got your letters here that you're working on, but I could give letters or give words to other players. I'm going to be trying to spell those words that match up with things that fly. I do need some swords. I've only got 1 sword here, so I'm not going to be able to bind the book, by spelling just the word dove, I also need to use 8 letters. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that flies just with these 4 letters that I have left. Now, I might be grabbing letters from other people, but what you're going to find that you're doing over that 3-minute time limit is you're going to be spelling other words that don't match up with your category just so that the letters get used. As long as they're in a word, you're good to go. You don't have to burn those letters. So if I could think of something else that might match up with those 4 letters that I have in front of me, or I could trade letters with one of the other players, then I can keep those. It doesn't have to be something that flies. Maybe I could arrange those 4 letters like this and it could spell load or road because I've got that wild card right here. That way I get to keep all of those letters at the end. I've got 2 words. I can't bind my book. This is a cooperative game, so it's probably not going to take me too long, like in this case, to be able to use up all of my letters. But then with this 3-minute timer here, there's a 3-minute time limit. I could help the other players. We could have conversations. We could trade letters or words back and forth to make sure that we're getting as close as possible to binding our books and to making the words and to making sure that we don't have too many leftover letters, etc. Once all of that's done and the timer runs out, well, that's when you get to check to see if anyone's bound their book. On the first round, often you're not going to be able to do that, but everybody checks. Maybe I was able to use 8 letters and make some things that fly with those 3 swords. I didn't do that in this case though. After that, once you've checked for everyone's book binding, if you do bind a book, you get to draw another card, and you're working on your second one. Once you've bound 2 books, then you don't have to bind books anymore. You're spending the rest of the rounds until everyone else is done helping the other players before you can do the final chapter. Everyone has to have their 2 books bound before the final chapter is able to happen. But once all of that is done, you've bound your books, well, then you're going to draw a villain card. These are the illiterati. These are the bad guys. It says on the back of the cards, making books nevermore. They don't want you to bind these books or to win the game. And so this is like an attack that's going to happen. And for this card, for example, each player is going to have to discard their shortest word, or the player with the longest word has to discard that one. So this is an attack. And this villain stays out from round to round, but at the end of each round, you're going to draw another one, and they're going to do their attack. It does get tricky. It does get complicated if you draw a duplicate. So there are there's 5 or 6 different villains here in the deck. But for example, if I drew a second one of this Fiora Ironclad, well, these stack up. So you're going to have a stack like this, and both attacks are going to happen. So if you draw a double, it gets worse. So as these things pile up, the longer it takes you, the more rounds it takes you to bind those books, the greater the chance is you're going to have to discard a whole bunch of stuff, probably stuff that you needed or wanted to hang on to. After the illiterati attack, that's when you have to figure out, well, what's left here that has to be burned. If I had these 3 letters, I'm okay. But if I have 4 letters left over, you're going to flip them all face down, and one of them is going to go into this burn tracker. At the 4th one, it's game over. You've lost the game. What skills are you practicing, though, when you play Illiterati? Obviously, it's a spelling game. You have to be a good speller. You have to know how to spell the words correctly. You can help each other to spell those words correctly and correct a younger person or somebody who's not very good at spelling. You can correct those mistakes along the way. So it is a spelling game. It is a time management game as well. So you've got to think about how much time you have left and whether you're really going to be puzzling out, can I spell another word to get closer to binding a book, or do I just need to use these letters as fast as I can and think of words so that they don't get burned at the end? The 3-minute time limit is such an interesting one because it's a long time, but it's not quite long enough to do all the things you might want to do. You might have one player who's, oh, I've used up all my letters, now I can help everybody else, but everybody's working a lot of the time through the entire time limit. Along with that time pressure, I mean, it is a cooperative game. There's teamwork that's happening here, but you have to communicate with one another. Oh, you've got that word, but I need that letter, or I need that symbol. Can I trade you this for that? And you're all trying to do that quickly. Well, and there's the divided attention component of you're still spelling words while you're talking to the other players and trying to bind those books. So I would say there's that communication component and teamwork component there too. The biggest thing here, though, is that you have to think of words that fit with those categories. You have to think of them quickly. So there is a skill that we measure in the kinds of assessments that I do at my office called verbal fluency or language fluency. What is fluency? Well, it's just being quick and automatic about something that you're doing. So, can you quickly and automatically think of words where all vowels must be hard? So, you're looking at the letters that you have, and oh, I've got the only one that fits that category is this letter O. You might want to make sure that you use this wild card as a vowel in that case, and you're trying to get 8, but you're doing that under time pressure. That's where the fluency comes in. Um, Cities, you've got to think of names of cities that you can spell with the letters that you have in front of you, and you're doing all of that under time pressure. So you're exercising that vocabulary, you're thinking of those vocabulary words, but the key is you have to think of them quickly. And it's so these books are so unique. Holidays and events. You've got to think of holidays that you can spell with those few letters. I only had 8 letters here at the beginning. At the beginning of each new round, I'm going to get 5 more, and I've got some words in front of me. So that's how you build things up in this game. But language fluency, I think, is the most important and interesting skill that we're talking about when we're playing Illiterati. Final thoughts about Illiterati. Well, I mean, look, the deluxe version of this game has amazing components. You can see these wooden chips that are going in these beautiful bags. They're kind of these soft, sort of velour kind of bags. In the deluxe version, they've got the logo on the front. It's super nice. The villain artwork, super good. And it's cooperative word building. I I love it. I mean, I think, and the fact that you can play it as a competitive, with one librarian versus another, and you're trying to be the first one to achieve some goals. That's a nice wrinkle too. But I really loved cooperating on this game and trying to figure out those words and working under that time pressure. It's one that I was excited about because one of my kids I learned later in the summer, actually. I didn't know that he was enthusiastic about this, but in between study sessions, when they need a break at school, they were playing Boggle. So my son and his fiance are playing Boggle a lot. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is a cooperative game that in a way sort of resembles Boggle. And you've got these great pieces and we're all playing together. So I thought that would be a lot of fun. And it was a big hit. Oh my goodness, they really did enjoy playing this game. And in fact, talked about it later on. So you've got the great components. The box has a great organizer inside. Everything stays in place. And it's a great box too. It's got the double-sided thing where it looks like a book that's being torn by the illiterati, and then you pull it out and everything slides. Super great components, fun theme, and fun mechanics in terms of the spelling. Downsides, well, let me tell you, although my son and his fiance really like these spelling games, my main game group are not really interested in spelling games. So to get a word game on the table is not easy for me to do. So it has to be my son who comes over. Sometimes non-gamers will play a spelling game like this, but this is one that's a little hard for me to get to the table. And then you've got that time pressure, which some might say would be a bit stressful. We didn't find that to be the case because 3 minutes is a good amount. Your mileage may vary on the stress of the time limits. I have one kid who, my younger son, he does not like games with sand timers. He does not want to have a time limit. He would always get too stressed, so it was hard to play Magic Maze with him, for example. The only other downside, like every component in this game is great, the sand timer, even like the color of the sand, sometimes we found the sand would get jammed up a little bit. We'd have to, shake it to make sure that the timer was still going. But I mean, you could set a 3-minute timer on your phone and then it would beep at the end, so you don't have to pay too much attention. I love these sand timers. I think they're fun. This one, every once in a while, we found the sand kind of wouldn't always continue going through, so we wound up with some extra time now and again. But that's extra time to play a fun game. So it's certainly not too much of a knock on this thing, and there's lots of other alternatives if you do find you get a sand timer where the sand clumps up a little bit. So Gap Closer Games created this one, and what a fun activity this was to play, and especially I got to play it with my boy and his fiance, my future daughter-in-law. what a great time. So this is a game I wanted to talk about before the end of the year. I'm getting ready for my top 10 game list, so I think I'm going to split that up over several episodes. So the next few weeks is going to be all about games that I played before. So this is the last probably new video of 2024, new game of 2024 that I could talk to you about. So what a fun one. The deluxe version is really amazing, but there's not huge differences between the deluxe and the standard version of this game. So if you have any questions, if you have any comments, you can of course leave them in the comment section below, or you can email me at brian@brainsongames.ca. Brainsongames.ca is the website. That's where future episodes will go. Previous ones are already up there. Brains on Games is the X handle and the Facebook page and the Instagram feed and the Blue Sky feed. So we're all over the place. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to be notified of future ones, you can head on over to YouTube and click that subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next time.